The bass in the Indigo Room pulsed like a second heartbeat too loud, too alive too much, but Haley let it swallow her whole. She wasn't someone who drowned her problems in neon haze and cheap liquor, usually, but tonight the world had pressed its full weight onto her chest. Another client ghosted her. Her rent was due in 3 days, and her last paycheck looked like a bad joke someone printed on paper. She'd told herself she just needed air, a distraction, a place where no one knew her name. But somehow, she ended up here in the middle of a packed dance floor, letting the music blur her edges. The blue-violet lights cascaded over her skin, catching on the shimmer of sweat along her collarbone. People moved around her, but she felt strangely alone, like she was dancing in the eye of a storm. Her curls bounced as she swayed, eyes half closed, trying to outrun her thoughts. For a few brief seconds, she actually managed to forget, until a hand touched her waist. Not a stranger's hand. Not the clumsy, bold grip of a drunk guy who thought the dance floor was a hunting ground. This touch was familiar, gentle first testing, as if asking a question without words. Her body reacted before her mind did. Her breath caught. She turned. And time, 8 long, messy, aching years of it, collapsed into a single heartbeat. Owen. He was no longer the 19-year-old college boy with a shy grin and pockets always full of paint stains from helping her carry art supplies. Time had sharpened him. His jawline looked carved, his suit tailored like a second skin, his shoulders broader, his presence larger. The soft edges she remembered were gone, replaced by the unmistakable poise of a man accustomed to owning every room he stepped into. But his eyes, gray cold, storm dark, when they landed on her, something broke, something old, something buried. Haley, he breathed, not quite believing the sight of her. It's really you. He sounded different, controlled, lower, as if he had learned to speak with caution because power made people listen too closely. Her pulse skittered. She knew she should step back, smile politely, maybe pretend she didn't care. She'd practiced that scene so many times in her mind should this moment ever come. But she had never expected to face him while tipsy, glowing with sweat, heart cracked open from exhaustion. "Hey, stranger," she whispered, her voice betraying her. "Didn't expect to see you in a place like this." He didn't answer right away. His gaze swept over her, slowly, the way a man looks at a ghost he thought he'd buried. "You look—" His voice trailed off like language itself failed him. "You look different. So do you." But really he didn't. Not to her. He still felt like the person she used to know, light on a quiet morning, warm laughter between library shelves, the boy who kissed her with shy urgency and made her believe the world held good things for her too. Except now he was refined steel instead of warm sunlight. A remix slowed the air around them, and Owen stepped closer. His hand hovered near her waist again, not assuming, not demanding, just an invitation. Haley should have said no. Instead, she breathed out, "Okay," and his fingers settled against her hip. A shock passed through her, sharp and sweet. He pulled her closer carefully, first, then with a familiarity that made her ribs ache. He smelled like winter and cedar, like something expensive and grounding all at once. Her hands found his shoulders out of instinct, and the moment they touched, Owen inhaled sharply, as if the years had dissolved at her slightest contact. They danced without speaking, bodies moving in the rhythm that belonged to them long before life tore them apart. His breath brushed her temple. Her forehead nearly touched his neck. The low lights blurred, and the room faded until only the two of them existed. Two stories colliding again after years spent pretending the other wasn't important. When the music picked up, he didn't let her go. If anything, his grip tightened. "You left," he murmured, barely audible, as if the words slipped out before he could catch them. Hailey's heart stuttered. "Owen." "8 years," he said quietly, "and you're still the last thing that can unbalance me." The confession cracked something deep inside her. She should walk away now, before she drowned in the tide of him, before the soft ache she'd carried for so long burst open and swallowed her whole. But the alcohol softened her resolve, and the loneliness of the past year had hollowed her out until she yearned for something familiar, something that had once felt like home. When Owen's forehead touched hers, just the lightest graze, a single thought echoed in her mind. "I never stopped wanting you." His hand slid from her hip to her lower back. She felt the heat of his palm radiate through her dress. He drew a slow, shaky breath, and she realized he wasn't as composed as he looked. "Let me take you home," he murmured. She nodded, a small, reckless motion, the kind she'd regret in the morning if she were the kind of woman who regretted honesty. They left the Indigo Room wordlessly. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the distant hum of city life. The pavement glistened from a recent rain, neon reflections waltzing in the puddles. Owen hailed a car, but when the driver asked for an address, Hailey hesitated, and he watched her too closely, as if he could sense the battle happening in her chest. She finally said, "Just drive." They didn't speak on the way. Owen sat close enough that their shoulders brushed whenever the car hit a bump, close enough that she felt the tension thrumming beneath his quiet exterior. She wondered if he was remembering the last time they were in a car together, her crying softly, him holding her hand, both pretending the end wasn't near. When they stopped in front of a boutique hotel, neither questioned the choice. Inside the room, the silence changed. It grew thick, pulsing with everything unspoken between them. Every memory, every regret, every unfinished sentence. Hailey toed off her shoes, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she felt under Owen's gaze. She turned slightly away, pretending to fuss with her hair, but he crossed the room and stopped behind her close enough that she felt his warmth. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "Not because of the past, not because you're hurting tonight." His voice was steady, but she heard the fear in it, fear she would run again. Fear she'd vanish before he understood why she'd left him all those years ago. Hailey turned to face him. "I'm not doing this because of the past," she whispered. "I'm doing it because I want to." Something in Owen broke softly, quietly, like breath released after years of holding it. He cupped her face, but gently, as if memorizing her features would fix the parts of his heart still scarred by her absence. Their first kiss wasn't desperate. It was slow, achingly slow, like two people learning each other again after losing and finding one another in the same breath. Then the restraint shattered. Clothes fell away. Words dissolved into gasps. Skin met skin, and everything they'd hidden from themselves came pouring out. Longing, frustration, hunger, the grief of separation, and the relief of reunion. Owen held her as if she were the only truth left in his life. Hailey kissed him like she was saying goodbye and hello at the same time. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't gentle. It was real. When dawn crept through the curtains, Owen stirred with a sleepy smile, one she recognized from years ago. Soft and unguarded, the version of him the world never saw. But the space beside him was cold. He sat up sharply. Hailey. No answer. Her side of the bed was empty, her bag gone. The room silent, except for the muffled city noise below. On the pillow lay a single silver teardrop earring, a calling card, an apology, a goodbye. He didn't touch it at first. He just stared, jaw-tightening, breath gone. The same fear he'd buried 8 years ago clawed its way to the surface. He clenched the earring in his palm. Not this time, he murmured to the empty room. Not again. For the first time in years, the poised billionaire facade cracked. He wasn't going to let her disappear. Not when he just felt what it was like to have her again, if only for one night. Not when he still tasted the truth she tried so hard to hide. And this time, if he found her, he wouldn't let her go without answers. Or without the truth he'd carried for 8 long years. He'd never stopped choosing her. Morning sunlight spilled across the penthouse like liquid gold, warming the marble floors and the towering glass windows that overlooked the city. It should have been a perfect morning. The kind Owen Hawke had earned through years of clawing his way up, building an empire, surviving boardroom wars, becoming the man newspapers labeled untouchable. But he sat on the edge of his bed, shirt still unbuttoned, hair tousled from sleep and frustration, staring at the single silver earring glinting in his palm. Hailey's earring, the only proof she'd been there at all. He turned it over between his fingers. The metal felt far too light for the weight it put on his chest. She had vanished, without a trace, no note on the nightstand, no number left behind, no promise that last night meant anything more than a blurred decision between music and memory. He pressed the earring into his fist until his knuckles whitened. He wasn't angry, not exactly, but something inside him, something old and still bleeding, shifted painfully. She had left him once, 8 years ago. Silent, decisive, as if severing him from her life was as effortless as breathing. Last night, he had felt her again. Her warmth, her softness, her hesitation, her hunger, the way her hands trembled slightly when they touched his skin. She had not been unaffected. She had not forgotten, but she had still walked away. Owen stood abruptly, pacing the length of his room. The skyline glinted outside the kingdom he'd built. Hawk Tower rose over the city like a blade. He could buy anything, control anything, reshape anything he wanted, except her. His phone buzzed against the dresser. A headline flashed. Owen Hawke returns to NYC after global expansion tour. The mind behind Hawke Media. He snorted bitterly. The world believed he had everything: influence, wealth, power. But this morning, he didn't possess the one thing he truly wanted Hailey do. The girl with midnight skin and fire-lit eyes. The girl who had once wanted the world but settled for leaving him instead. He grabbed his suit jacket, already calculating. Not this time, he muttered. He called the hotel first. Nothing. She used cash. No ID. He checked the hallway cameras. A blur of curls, a coat thrown over one shoulder, disappearing into the elevator. He questioned staff. They'd seen her, but only briefly. Then she was gone. As if she had been a dream. A perfect, tormenting dream. He closed his hand around the earring again. I will find you. And when he did, she wouldn't get to disappear without answering him not again. Meanwhile, Hailey sat curled on her worn sofa in her tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city, hands wrapped around a mug of too strong coffee. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, painting faint stripes across her bare knees. She tried to steady her breathing, but the memory of Owen's hands, Owen's mouth, Owen's eyes, all of it kept returning in relentless waves. She hated how vivid it still felt. She had promised herself she was done with him, done with the complicated ache of wanting someone she couldn't have, done with the humiliation of not being enough for him, for his family, for the world he belonged to. Her phone buzzed, a reminder. Interview Hawk Media, 11:00 a.m. She froze. Right, she whispered to herself that a freelance friend had submitted her portfolio without telling her. When an email invitation arrived, Hailey nearly deleted it. She had no business walking into a corporation like Hawk Media, much less appearing in front of the CEO, who had just held her in his bed. Except she didn't know he was the CEO. She had no idea. Owen hadn't just built a company, he'd built the company. And she certainly didn't know he was back in town until last night, until fate alcohol and the universe's twisted sense of humor threw them into the same orbit again. Hailey pressed the heels of her palms to her eyes. It was one night, she reminded herself sharply. Just one. But her heartbeat refused to obey. 3 days later, the elevator dinged softly as Hailey stepped out into the sleek 11th floor lobby of Hawk Media. Her palms were damp. She wiped them on her blazer. The company smelled like ambition and cold metal polished surfaces, tall glass partitions, white marble floors. Her boots clicked too loudly, or maybe it was just her nerves. She checked in at reception, received her guest pass, and found herself led to a conference room where several other candidates were waiting. She took the seat farthest from the head of the table. The room hummed with quiet conversation until a sudden shift in atmosphere silenced everyone. Footsteps approached, unhurried, confident. The door opened. Owen walked in. The air vanished from Hailey's lungs. He was in a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie. Poised, controlled. Every inch the man the articles worshipped. His face betrayed nothing until his gaze found hers. Then something flickered dark and cutting. He stopped walking. The room fell into stunned silence. Hailey sat frozen, feeling heat rise up her neck. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She could see recognition in every micro-expression he failed to hide. So this was the universe's punchline. Owen regained his composure first, though his jaw ticked once, barely noticeable, unless someone knew him well. "Good morning," he said to the room voice, smooth but edged with something sharp. "I'll be overseeing this round personally." Hailey's stomach dropped. Of course he would. Of course the universe would put her directly in front of the man she'd run from twice. As he moved toward the head of the table, he passed her. She felt the air shift, felt the weight of him, the way his focus lingered on her a fraction too long, felt the silent accusation in the space between them. He took his seat, steepled his hands, and surveyed the candidates. But his gaze returned to her like a gravitational pull he couldn't break. "Before we begin," he said, tone deceptively calm, "there's something that needs returning." He reached into his pocket. Hailey's blood ran cold. No, please no. He placed something on the polished table surface with deliberate care, a soft metallic tap that echoed through the room like a gavel striking judgment. Her earring. Recognition rippled among the candidates, curiosity, gossip-scented excitement, confusion. Owen didn't look away from Hailey. "Miss Dew," he said, voice low enough to feel like a private threat. "I believe this belongs to you." Heat crashed through her mortification, anger, an electric flicker of desire she didn't want but couldn't extinguish. Her fingers curled around the edge of her chair until her joints ached. Owen leaned back in his seat, composed but burning beneath the surface. After the session, he added evenly, "I need a word with you, privately." The last word held too much weight, too much memory. Hailey swallowed hard. This was bad. This was very, very bad. She'd planned on slipping in, interviewing quietly, and slipping out another face in the corporate machine. Nothing more. Instead, she had become the epicenter of a storm she didn't see coming. She forced herself to meet his gaze just once. She shouldn't have, because in that single moment, she saw it beneath the polished CEO exterior, beneath the cold self-control. A man who had spent 8 years burning. A man who wasn't going to let her run again. She inhaled shakily. This was the beginning of something she wasn't ready for. Something complicated. Something dangerous. But beneath all that, something she still wanted, even if it ruined her. The conference room door hadn't even clicked shut before Hailey felt her knees threaten to give out. Her pulse hammered unevenly, each beat ricocheting through her like the echo of a long-forgotten wound. She clutched the strap of her bag, the cool leather grounding her just enough to keep from trembling. Behind her, Owen didn't move. He stood there silent, controlled, devastating, like a storm disguised in a tailored suit. Even without touching her, his presence pressed against her spine, hot and overwhelming. She didn't have to turn around to know his eyes were fixed on her. He always used to look at her like that, as if one glance could unravel everything she tried so hard to keep together. Hailey forced air into her lungs and willed her voice not to shake. "Owen, about that night, we both know it shouldn't have happened." A muscle in his cheek twitched. His arms folded across his chest, not defensively, but like a man anchoring himself. He stepped forward slowly, deliberately, until she could feel the warmth of him at her back. "Call it whatever helps you sleep," he said, his tone quiet, far too calm. "But don't pretend it didn't mean anything." She spun to face him, anger flaring as a shield against the ache in her chest. "I'm not pretending. I'm being realistic." His eyes darkened. "Realistic," he repeated as if testing the word for cracks. "That's what you call running away before sunrise." She flinched before she could stop herself. Owen saw it. Of course he saw it. He'd always been able to read her too well. He leaned in, not enough to touch, but close enough that she could smell the faint trace of cedar and citrus on his skin. Familiar, intoxicating, lethal. 8 years, Hailey," he said softly. "I waited 8 years for a chance to ask why you left. You finally show up in my life again, and the first thing you do is disappear." Her throat tightened. She could feel the truth clawing at her ribs, begging to be freed, but she pressed it down. She had buried her reasons so deeply that digging them up now felt dangerous. "I didn't come here to revisit the past," she said, forcing her voice steady. I came for an interview. That's all. You came here, Owen murmured, eyes narrowing, because life finally pushed you back into my orbit. And you expect me to ignore it? Expect you, she echoed. I expect nothing from you. Not anymore. He laughed, quiet, humorless. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief, frustration, wrapped in something raw. You really think you can say that? He said, stepping closer, again after last night. She broke eye contact, unable to withstand the intensity. Last night hadn't been an accident. It hadn't been the alcohol. It had been years of longing compressed into a single collision. Owen, she exhaled shaky. Please don't do this. He tilted his head. Do what? Make this bigger than it is. It is bigger, he said. It always was. The room felt too small, too warm, too bright. She needed to leave before she shattered completely. Hailey took a step back. Owen matched it instantly. Stop, she said quietly. No, he replied, equally quiet. For a second, the air between them pulsed alive, dangerous. She swallowed hard and forced the words out. You want answers? Fine. The truth is, the person you're looking for isn't me. That's a lie. She jerked. You don't get to decide that. Maybe not. He said, voice low. But I get to decide what I see. And what I see is the same woman I fell in love with. The same woman standing here shaking because she cares more than she admits. Her eyes burned. She blinked rapidly. You don't know me anymore. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her cheek. Then tell me. She froze. There it was. The invitation she'd spent years preparing, excuses to avoid. Tell him. Tell him about the debts, the sickness, the eviction notices, the way her world had collapsed in one brutal week, leaving her with nothing except the certainty that he deserved better than her broken pieces. Tell him how terrified she was of not fitting into his polished life, of being the wrong color, wrong class, wrong background. Tell him how she'd left because loving him felt like holding a star. Too bright, too far, impossible to claim. But Hailey had spent 8 years learning to survive by silence. And survival was a habit not easily broken. So she said the only thing she could force past the tightness in her throat. It's not something you need to know anymore. Owen stiffened. It was subtle, but she saw it, the softness retreating the walls rising again. He nodded once, slowly, as if trying to decide whether to laugh or punch a wall. Then a small smile curved his mouth. Not warm, not tender. A warning. Be careful, Hailey, he said softly, because if you walk away now, it won't make me forget. It will only make me try harder. Her breath hitched. He stepped forward, and she stepped back, but it didn't create distance. It only made him look at her even more intently. You left once, he murmured. I didn't understand it then, but I'm not that boy anymore, and I won't let you vanish without a reason. Her chest tightened painfully. Owen, she whispered. Please, no. His voice was steel. Not again. She couldn't take another second. Hailey spun and hurried out of the room, heart pounding so violently she feared it might crack her ribs. The corridor outside felt colder, the polished floor too bright under the fluorescent lights. She didn't stop walking, didn't dare look back. But she heard him, his voice soft enough that only she could catch it, yet loud enough that it anchored itself in her spine. "I found you once," he said, "and I'll find you again." She stumbled briefly, hands shaking. "Don't look back," she told herself. "Don't you dare look back." Because she knew what would happen if she did. She'd crumble. She'd run straight into him. She'd confess everything. Every scar, every fear, every long-kept longing. Most terrifying of all, she'd let herself believe in him again. And believing in Owen Hawke was a dangerous thing. Hailey pressed a hand to her trembling chest as she hurried toward the elevator. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of herself. Because for the first time in 8 years, she wasn't sure she could outrun him. Or outrun the truth. She still wanted him. She always had. And now that he knew she was close, he wasn't going to let her disappear. Not this time. For 7 days, Hailey lived inside a tight, self-constructed bubble of denial. She filled her planner with overlapping deadlines, accepted 3 small projects and one she had no business promising to finish, worked late at a cramped studio downtown where the heating didn't always work and the windows rattled when trains passed. She drowned herself in tasks until she barely slept, barely ate, barely. Let silence enter her mind, because silence was dangerous. Silence left space for Owen, and she couldn't afford that. Not when her heart still hadn't recovered from simply seeing him again. Not when her body still remembered the shape of him. Not when his voice replayed at the back of her mind whenever she let her guard slip. "You left." I never understood why. She tried to convince herself that it was over again, that the universe had played its cruel joke, and now they could return to their separate lives. That Owen, with his empire and 10,000 responsibilities, had surely already moved on to more important matters. But denial had never been strong enough to hold back reality. On Friday night, exhaustion clung to her shoulders as she locked the studio door and stepped into the chilly air. Streetlights cast thin halos across the pavement, and the city hummed with its usual restless energy. Hailey hugged her coat tighter around her and headed toward her apartment building, a modest brick complex with rusting railings and flickering porch lights. She saw it immediately. A sleek black car idled in the loading zone, too polished, too elegant to belong in her neighborhood. Her steps faltered. The car window lowered. Owen, of course. The cold night seemed to tilt around her, and she clutched the strap of her bag to steady herself. He sat in the driver's seat, his face lit faintly from the dashboard glow. Sharp jawline, weary eyes, hair slightly mussed, as though he'd dragged a hand through it several times. He looked tired, but determined. He didn't smile, didn't pretend this was casual. "Get in," he said quietly. She stood still. "Owen, it's late." "I know. I'm exhausted. I see that. Then why are you here?" His gaze locked onto hers with a force that made her breath slip in her throat. "Because I need to talk to you, and you've been avoiding me all week." She flinched. He wasn't accusing her, but he was stating a truth she couldn't deny. "I'm not Hailey." He interrupted softer, but firmer. "No more running." He had said it gently, but it hit her like a closing door behind her. The last thing she wanted was a confrontation, even less a conversation that could unravel the fragile threads holding her together. But his voice carried too much hurt, too much sincerity for her to walk away. After a long battle inside her chest, she exhaled shakily and opened the car door. The warmth inside the cabin wrapped around her immediately. Owen didn't start driving. He didn't speak. He just sat there, looking straight ahead, breathing in slow, measured intervals, like he was preparing for a war he didn't want to fight. For a while, neither of them said anything. The silence wasn't comfortable. It was loaded heavy with all the questions, regrets, and fears they'd locked away for 8 long years. Finally, Owen turned toward her. His eyes were clear, steady. That night, you left without a word. She stared at her hands in her lap. You left me once before the same way, her breath caught. I'm not here to punish you for it, he said, but I never understood, and I need to. Owen, you owe me the truth. That's not fair. It's honest. She faced the window, watching her own faint reflection in the glass, the tired angles of her face, the worry in her eyes, the woman she had become. 8 years ago, he continued, you sent me a single message telling me not to look for you, and you never explained. His voice softened. You were the one person I thought would never shut me out. Pain radiated through her chest. I did what I had to. No, Owen said quietly. You did what you thought you deserved. Her throat tightened painfully. She curled her hands into fists, nails digging into her palms. You don't know anything about what I deserved. Then, she whispered, then tell me. I can't. Why not? Because it's in the past. He let out a breath, a controlled, quiet exhale that betrayed how much effort he was using not to raise his voice. It's not the past for me, he said. You think 8 years made me forget? That I just moved on? Like nothing ever happened, she swallowed hard. She had imagined him doing exactly that, living a brilliant life surrounded by luxury and opportunity while she scraped by. She had pictured him laughing at parties, making connections, dating beautiful women from the world he belonged to. She thought time had softened the pain for him the way it had hardened her. She had been wrong. His eyes, storm gray and unguarded, told a different story, one that made her chest ache. Hailey, he said, lowering his voice until it was almost a plea, if you had needed help. If something had happened, I would have been there. For anything. You know that. She did. Too well. And that was exactly why she had walked away. Hailey shook her head, blinking back the sting in her eyes. Things were complicated back then. Then uncomplicate them. It's not that simple. His jaw tightened. Try me. Silence stretched again, thick and suffocating. He watched her with a patience that looked painful, as if each second he waited cost him something he didn't want to admit. Finally, she whispered, You had everything ahead of you. So did you. Not like you, Hailey. You came from privilege. I came from debt collectors banging on the door at midnight. Her voice cracked. And that gap mattered. Owen's expression shifted, hurt, anger, disbelief intertwining. That never mattered to me, he said. It mattered to life, she shot back. To the world, to your family, to everyone who looked at us and saw something doomed. He stared at her emotions, raw and unconcealed. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me decide what I could handle? Tears threatened to spill. She bit them back with force. Because I didn't want you to choose the weight of my life over the promise of yours. The truth slipped out in a whisper before she could bury it again. Owen froze, completely. For a long moment, he didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't move. Then he said, barely audible, So you made that choice for me. She reached for the door handle, needing escape before she drowned in the intensity of his gaze. I should go. Hailey, she paused. His voice was different now, quiet, stripped of the confident armor he always wore. "Give me one chance," he said, "just one. Not to fix the past, to understand it." Her hand trembled on the door. She stepped out before her heart betrayed her completely. The cold air struck her skin like a warning. She closed the door gently, afraid that slamming it would break something fragile between them. Owen leaned forward, eyes following her through the open window. "Hailey." She turned slightly, unable to ignore him. "Let the truth breathe," he said. "Just once." Her throat tightened. She couldn't speak, not without breaking. So she said nothing. But her silence wasn't rejection. It was surrender. The quiet, terrified kind. The kind that whispered what her lips couldn't. "I never stopped caring. I never stopped missing you. I never stopped loving you." She walked toward her building, each step heavier than the last. Behind her, Owen watched as if he could still feel every unspoken word between them. And he would follow them. Follow her until he had answers. Or until she stopped running. Whichever came first. Hailey had never been the type to track dates obsessively. Her life ran on deadlines, not calendars, project due dates, rent notices, overdue invoices. But even she couldn't ignore the quiet alarm going off in her mind after the second week came and went with nothing. By the 30th day, she stood in the bathroom, staring at a plastic stick that felt heavier than steel. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Her hands trembled. Her throat felt tight enough to choke her. 2 lines, not faint, not ambiguous, clear, definitive, positive. Her knees buckled and she gripped the edge of the sink as the truth washed over her in a dizzying, terrifying wave. She was pregnant. The world didn't merely tilt, it spun. Every memory of that night with Owen came rushing back like heat against her skin. The way he whispered her name, the way his hands held her, as though afraid she would disappear, even in sleep, the way her body had melted against his without hesitation, without boundaries, without the armor she'd carried for so long. A child, their child. She slid to the edge of the tub, feeling the cold porcelain against her legs as her breath came unevenly. Shock mingled with fear, but beneath it all, there was something else, something fragile and luminous, a small, trembling awareness blooming inside her chest. Life. A quiet miracle. One she had never expected. One she hadn't dared dream of. Her fingers drifted to her stomach, the touch tentative, reverent. "Hey there," she whispered, voice cracking in the empty room. "It's just us. Okay?" But the next words didn't come easily, because the moment she whispered us, another question rose like a shadow creeping across the floor. Should she tell Owen? The thought alone made her pulse quicken. She could already see the storm that would follow his shock. His anger at being kept in the dark. His instinctive need to take control. Owen was a man who stepped into responsibility without hesitation. He always had been. But what would he be stepping into? A child, a family, a future, or a chain he felt obligated to wear? Hailey pressed both hands to her stomach, breathing through the knot forming in her chest. She knew Owen cared, maybe more than cared, but caring was not the same as choosing. And choosing wasn't the same as loving. She had to protect herself, protect the baby. protect the fragile thing blooming inside her that she feared might shatter if she made the wrong move. Just you and me, she murmured again, as if saying it could make it true. But life is rarely kind to secrets. 3 days later, she learned the universe had no intention of letting her hide. The gallery was unusually warm that afternoon, a consequence of too many visitors and an old HVAC system struggling against the sudden spike in humidity. Hailey had been on her feet since morning cataloging new pieces, fixing the lighting on a sculpture, dealing with a buyer who couldn't decide which painting looked more expensive. Her head buzzed. Her vision pulsed at the edges. She chalked it up to fatigue, until the room swayed. Not gently, not gradually. It swooped in sudden and disorienting, as though someone had reached out and yanked the ground from beneath her feet. Her breath hitched. She reached for the wall, but missed her fingertips grazing air instead of the cool plaster. And then, strong hands caught her. Familiar hands. Whoa, Hailey, careful! Her heart plummeted before her eyes even opened. Owen! He stood behind her, one arm braced around her waist, the other steadying her shoulder. His touch was warm, solid, so achingly familiar it made her eyes sting. She swallowed hard. I'm fine. You're not, he countered instantly. She'd forgotten how sharp his instincts were. Or maybe she just hoped they'd dulled over the years. But no, he read her the same way he always had, as if her emotions were printed along the inside of her skin. He guided her into the small break room at the back of the gallery, his hand remaining at her back even after she was seated. The gesture was instinctive, protective, dangerous. She inhaled deeply, trying to steady the whirl of her pulse. Just tired. He didn't buy it. His eyes swept over her, worried, assessing, far too perceptive. What's going on with you? He asked quietly. Nothing. I just... Hailey, he said, and the sound of her name in his voice, firm, gentle, threaded with something too tender, unraveled her composure. Talk to me. Her throat tightened. She dropped her gaze to her knees, afraid he'd see too much in her face. He crouched in front of her, leveling his eyes with hers. You look pale. You nearly collapsed out there. What's wrong? Nothing. She insisted, but it came out thin, guilty. Don't do this, he whispered. Don't shut me out again. Her breath faltered. He was too close, too sincere, too earnest. A single touch from him, a single look, and every reason she had to keep her distance felt like a flimsy card tower collapsing under the weight of him. She stayed silent. Owen's jaw flexed. He reached out slowly, almost without realizing it, and pressed his palm lightly against her abdomen. The contact was feather soft, but it might as well have been lightning striking through her. Hailey jolted upright, grabbing his wrist. Owen, don't. His eyes widened a fraction, not in anger, not even suspicion at first. Just surprise. Then something changed in his expression, subtle but undeniable. His breath stilled. His brows drew together not sharply, but with the kind of dawning clarity that made the air thicken between them. Hailey, he said, voice low, almost disbelieving. Why don't you want me to touch you there? Her chest tightened painfully. Owen watched her every flicker of her eyelashes, every tremor in her hands, every fraction of a second it took for her to pull away. And realization flickered in his eyes, a spark, a question, a terrifying, impossible possibility. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She had thought she could hide this. She had thought she could hold her secret close a little longer. But Owen Hawksharp, intuitive, relentless, was already putting the pieces together. And the truth was pressing at the edges, demanding space, demanding air. She turned her face away, but it was too late. Owen's voice deepened, unsteady. "Hailey, tell me what's going on." Her heart hammered so violently she feared he might hear it. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since she'd held that pregnancy test in her shaking hands, she knew the moment she had feared was here. She couldn't hide this, not from him, not anymore. Ailey forced herself to sit, though her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Boneless, unsteady, trembling beneath the weight of what could no longer be hidden. The small break room suddenly felt too quiet, too bright, too intimate. She clasped her hands together to keep them from shaking. But even that couldn't disguise the tremor running through her. Across from her, Owen didn't move. He stood as if rooted to the ground, every muscle taut, every breath trapped somewhere in his chest. The shadows under his eyes seemed darker now, carved sharply by shock, and something deeper, fear maybe, hope maybe, or both at once. His voice, when it came, was low and uneven. "Hailey, are you pregnant?" The question didn't explode in the room. It sank, heavy, inevitable. Hailey couldn't force words out. Her throat was too tight for sound, her mind spinning with panic and emotion too tangled to name. She didn't speak, but her silence, raw trembling, was louder than any confession. Owen inhaled sharply, staggered by the answer she hadn't voiced. He took a step back, as though an invisible force had struck him right in the chest. Then he found his voice again, quieter this time, and, "Is it mine?" Hailey shut her eyes, not in guilt, in fear. Fear of the future, fear of the past, fear of what loving him again would cost her. "Owen," her voice cracked, "I'm not ready to. It's mine." No hesitation now, no tremor. A statement, not a question. Hailey opened her eyes slowly. Owen was staring at her with an intensity that burned straight to the bone, an intensity that said he already knew the answer, that he'd known the moment she jerked away from his touch. She swallowed hard pain, rising like a tide. She knew exactly what would happen next. Owen would step up. He would protect her, provide for her, arrange her life into something neat and safe and suffocatingly secure. He'd do it because that was who he was. A man of loyalty. A man who carried duty like a second skin. But she didn't want to be his duty. She didn't want to be an obligation. Her voice trembled. "Owen, we can't. What can't we?" His tone wasn't raised, but it vibrated with something sharp. "Can't talk. Can't face this. Or can't be honest with each other." "We can't go backward," she whispered. "We can't pretend we're something we're not just because you're pregnant." She nodded, ashamed of the way her chest tightened. Owen stepped closer, his expression tightening, disbelief and anger flickering through his eyes. He wasn't angry at her. She knew him too well to misread that. He was angry at the implication, at the idea that he was the kind of man who needed circumstance to tether him. "You think this changes what I feel?" he asked, voice low. "You think I'm the type to stay because I'm trapped?" "That's not what I meant." "No." His jaw tightened. Because it sure sounds like you think this baby is some kind of accident I'm being cornered into. Her breath shook. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Something flickered in him, a flare of hurt he tried to bury, but she saw it anyway. She had always seen too much of him. Hailey's gaze dropped to the floor. I'm scared, Owen. His breath softened instantly. One beat, two, and then his anger melted into something gentler, deeper. He moved closer, not invading, not demanding, but simply closing the space between them, the way he used to, when they were younger, when the world felt smaller and their problems felt conquerable. What are you scared of? He asked quietly. Her eyes stung as she whispered, that you'll regret this, that you'll regret me. Owen froze, a stunned silence filling the room. For the record, she forced herself to continue. I'm not perfect for your world. I never was. I'm not the woman people expect at your side. I'm not polished or powerful or stop. His voice cut through her like a blade, not harsh, but impossibly firm. He knelt in front of her before she could react, his hands bracing on either side of her chair, caging her gently in a way that made her heart thud wildly. Don't say that about yourself, he said, his voice breaking at the edges. Not ever. Hailey blinked, caught off guard by the rawness in his tone. I don't love you despite who you are, he whispered. I love you because of who you are. Her breath stalled. She hadn't expected him to say it. Not like this, with the quiet conviction of someone who wasn't trying to persuade her, but simply telling her the truth. He took her hands, gently lifting them from her lap, with the reverence of someone holding something precious. You're strong, he said. Even when life was cruel to you, even when you had every reason to break, you didn't. His thumb brushed her knuckles. You're kind. You're brilliant. You see the world differently, more honestly than anyone I know. You make things beautiful, even when they're falling apart. Her lips trembled. And yes, he added softly, you drive me absolutely insane. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. Honestly, you always have. She let out a shaky laugh that dissolved into a sob. Owen stood slowly, his movements deliberate, and placed a hand over her abdomen, as if reaching for something sacred. His fingers rested there lightly, as if he feared pressing too hard might break the moment. Hailey, he whispered, this isn't a burden. Not the baby, not you. This, his palm warmed her skin, even through her clothes. This is the most extraordinary thing you've ever given me. Her breath hitched. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She had been bracing for rejection, for disappointment, for duty disguised as affection. She had armored herself against every possible reaction, except this one, the one she secretly longed for, but never allowed herself to imagine. Her voice gave out on the first attempt. She tried again. I didn't want to trap you. You couldn't trap me if you tried. His voice was steady, unshakable. I am here because I want to be. I have always wanted to be where you are. Hailey felt something inside her crumble, something old, something brittle, fear, shame, loneliness. They shattered under the warmth of his words. When he pulled her into his arms, she didn't resist. She didn't overthink. She didn't run. She broke. She sobbed into his chest as his arms wrapped around her strong and steady, as if he'd been waiting 8 years for the chance to hold her again without reservation. His hand stroked the back of her head, gentle, protective. "We'll figure this out," he murmured into her hair. "Together." The word "together" cracked her open all over again. For the first time since the test turned positive, she let herself imagine a future that didn't terrify her. A future that wasn't defined by fear or scarcity or abandonment. A future with him. A future where their child wouldn't enter the world in shadow, but in light. Hailey buried her face in his chest and let herself believe just for a moment that she didn't have to run in a year, that she didn't have to carry everything alone, that the truth she'd been terrified to face might be the very thing that finally set her free. And in Owen's arms, trembling, but held afraid, but not alone, she let the truth breathe. She let herself breathe. She let him in. The news broke faster than Hailey could blink. She hadn't posted a single photo. She hadn't told more than 3 people. She hadn't even fully accepted the new life fluttering beneath her own skin, not yet. But apparently, someone in the hospital, or the gallery, or one of the staff who had seen Owen carrying her out the day she nearly fainted had spoken to the wrong person. And overnight, the story had detonated across every major headline. The Hawk Heir expects child with unknown artist, interracial romance shakes, billionaire world, who is Hailey do? Investors concerned about company image. Hailey avoided social media entirely. The few glimpses she accidentally saw, cruel comments doubting her, mocking her background, dissecting her race like it was a scandal, felt like knives. But she forced herself to breathe, to focus on the baby, to remember Owen's arms around her when she told him the truth, the certainty in him. Still, when she arrived at his office that morning, her chest felt tight with dread. She knocked softly. "Owen, you texted." The moment she stepped inside, she froze. He stood at the window, overlooking the city. Tall, composed on the outside, but his hand was gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His jaw was locked to shoulders. Tense, eyes burning with a thunder she'd only seen a handful of times before. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry because of her. "Owen," she whispered. "What happened?" He turned. One glance told her everything. Something inside her dropped, heavy and cold. "The board called an emergency meeting," he said, voice rough. "They're demanding I end things with you." The world tilted beneath her feet. She tried to swallow, but her throat felt sand dry. End things. Because of the baby. Because of everything. Owen's voice sharpened. "Because you're not the right fit. Because they're afraid of losing partners in Europe. Because some idiot investor threw around words like reputation risk." Her stomach knotted. "Because I'm black." He didn't deny it. He looked like he wanted to throw something through the glass. They didn't say it directly, he said, jaw tight. But it was there, in every tone, every loaded pause. A hollow ache spread in her chest like frost. She had expected judgment from strangers, but hearing the phrases out loud, not elegant, not polished, not from the right background, made something inside her shrink. And yet she kept her voice steady. "What did you tell them?" Owen's eyes softened the moment they met hers. He stepped toward her slowly, as if approaching something fragile, precious. "I told them that my personal life is not a negotiation." and that their prejudice doesn't dictate my family. Her breath caught. Family. He said it so naturally, as though it had always been the truth, but she shook her head, anxiety rising. Owen, if this scandal hurts your company, your employees, it won't. You don't know that. I do, he said firmly. Because I'm not hiding you. I'm not hiding our child. And I'm sure as hell not letting anyone shame you out of my life. Her pulse thudded in her ears. He reached her fully, then his hands sliding gently into hers, warm, steady anchoring. What I want, he said, voice dropping to something quiet and fierce, is you. What I choose is you, and what I will fight for every damn day is us. Hailey's eyes stung. Owen, I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. His thumb brushed her cheek. Then you're worrying about the wrong thing, because the only thing I'm afraid of losing is you. Something inside her cracked open. Not pain this time. Something hopeful. Something that felt dangerously close to peace. But she still whispered, barely audible, I don't want you sacrificing your life for me. He shook his head. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm prioritizing what matters. Her breath trembled as he leaned his forehead against hers, a rare vulnerability slipping through the confident exterior. I'm choosing the future I want, not the one the board expects. Without waiting for her reply, he pulled away, straightened, and said, in a tone carved from steel, I'm calling a press conference. Her eyes widened. Owen, it's time they heard the truth from me, he said. Not from tabloids. Not from rumors. From me. Hailey watched it happen live. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, her old laptop humming loudly as if straining to keep up with the stream. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles trembled. Owen walked to the podium with calm confidence, cameras firing like a barrage of lightning. Questions buzzed in the air, hostile probing calculated. But he raised a hand commanding instant silence. I have one statement, he said, voice steady enough to shake her. Then he looked straight into the cameras, and somehow she felt his gaze reach her across the city. The woman I love is expecting our child, he said clearly, and I will protect them with everything I have. A soft gasp rippled through the room of reporters. Owen continued unapologetic. No one dictates who I love, no board, no investor, no outdated belief about race, class, or image. His jaw set. If anyone assumes our relationship is a liability, they're mistaken. Hailey is the most extraordinary woman I've ever known, and our child is not a scandal. They're a blessing. Hailey's vision blurred. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't careful with his words the way CEOs usually were. He was proud. Proud of her. Proud of their child. Proud of the life they were beginning. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in 8 long years. To be chosen. To be fought for. Not as an obligation. Not as a mistake. As love. She leaned closer to the laptop screen, watching Owen finish his statement with unwavering certainty, watching him stand taller than she had ever seen. He wasn't the boy she'd loved at 20. He wasn't the man she'd run from. He wasn't the billionaire headline. He was hers. And for the first time since fate collided them in that bar, she let herself believe it. Let herself want it. Let herself dream of a future where she didn't have to run, because this time Owen was running toward her. The delivery room was warm, washed in soft yellow light, the kind meant to soothe anxious hearts. But nothing could soothe the intensity running through Hailey's body as another contraction tore through her. She clung to Owen's hand as if his steadiness alone tethered her to this moment, this miracle, and he held on with a quiet strength that never once faltered. He had been there since dawn, refusing to leave even when the nurses told him he could take a break. His hair was messy, his eyes red-rimmed with worry and sleeplessness, but his presence was unwavering. Every time she looked at him, she saw a kind of devotion she still wasn't used to. A devotion that tightened her throat and made her chest swell. "You're almost there?" he whispered, brushing a curl away from her damp forehead. His voice shook, but not from fear, from awe, from love, from something greater than both of them. She pushed, she screamed, she gasped for breath, and then a cry, sharp, new, perfect, a sound that broke something open in both of them. Hailey fell back against the pillows, chest heaving as tears filled her eyes. Owen covered his mouth with his free hand, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw him fall apart, completely, beautifully. A nurse placed a tiny bundle against Hailey's chest. A baby girl, warm, soft, brown-skinned, and impossibly small. Hailey's heart clenched when she saw the delicate hints of Owen in her features, those storm-colored eyes still adjusting to the world, the determined little mouth. Hailey trembled as she touched her daughter's cheek. "Hi, sweet girl," she whispered, voice breaking into a smile. "Hi." Owen stepped closer, tears slipping down his face unchecked. He touched the baby's head with reverence, as if he were afraid she might dissolve under his fingertips. And then he met Hailey's gaze, one filled with a depth he'd never been able to fully express until now. "You changed everything," he murmured, voice raw. "You made my life something immeasurably better." Hailey's throat tightened. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, then looked up at the man who had once been a painful ghost and now stood as the anchor of her new world. "And you," she whispered, tears falling freely, "showed me I was worthy of being loved." Their foreheads touched, their breaths mingled, their daughter squirmed softly between them. In that moment, nothing outside the room mattered. Not the headlines, not the shareholders, not the years they lost. Only this small family, suspended in a pocket of tenderness they'd built through every fear, every fight, every impossible choice. 1 year later, sunlight filled their home like a blessing. The house they moved into wasn't the largest one Owen had shown her. It wasn't the most expensive, or the one the real estate agent assured them was worthy of a CEO. It was the one Hailey chose, a little craftsman in a quiet suburb lined with trees that bloomed wildly in spring, and bathed the living room in warm gold throughout the afternoon. Hailey loved it the moment she saw it. Owen loved it because she did. Baby Ellie, no longer a newborn, but still small enough to clutch her father's fingers, was teetering from the couch toward the coffee table legs, wobbly but determined. Hailey hovered nearby, close enough to catch her, far enough to let her try. Owen stood by the doorway, arms crossed, watching their daughter as if she were discovering gravity itself. "She's going to run before she walks," he muttered. Hailey laughed softly. "She gets that from you." "No," he countered. His gaze softened. "She gets her courage from you." Ellie took 2 more steps before plopping down with a squeal. Owen moved without thinking, swooping her up, spinning her, once her giggles filling the house like music. Hailey watched them, her heart swelling until it almost hurt. She walked over and slid a hand over Owen's back. He turned slightly, leaning into her touch. "We made it," she said quietly. He looked at her, really looked. The kind of gaze that held years in it history hurt forgiveness, joy, and something deeper than all of it. "Yeah," he whispered, "we have." But Hailey shook her head gently. "No, I mean—" She gestured around them to the baby toys scattered across the rug, to the half-finished painting in the corner, to the framed family photo from the hospital sitting proudly on the mantel. "We came so far, Owen, from the girl who ran away and the boy who didn't understand, to this." He bent down, setting Ellie on the rug where she began gnawing on a plush elephant. Then he cupped Hailey's face with both hands. "I would go through all of it again," he said. "Every moment, every heartbreak, if it led me right back here." The words lodged in her chest, warm and overwhelming. "And I'll go anywhere," he murmured, brushing his thumb along her jaw. "As long as you're beside me." She leaned into him, letting his commitment wrap around her like the steady beat of home. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted the yard in soft amber. The wind rustled through the trees like a whisper of all the things they had survived and all the things they would build together. Ellie crawled into the space between them, pulling at Owen's pant leg, babbling happily. He laughed, scooping her up, and Hailey slipped her arms around both of them. A family, messy, unexpected, perfect. Their little world hummed with a quiet, contented certainty they had found their way back to each other. Not through luck, not through chance, through courage, through honesty, through love that refused to die. The sunlight wrapped around the three of them, soft and golden, warming, blessing ceiling. A full circle ending. A beginning too. Home. In every way that mattered, in every way they had fought for, in every way they chose, together, always, and forever.